Welcome to Pick Up and Deliver, the podcast where I pick up my audio recorder as I head out for a walk and deliver an episode to you while I stroll around. I'm Brendan Riley. Well, good afternoon, listeners. It is a lovely day here in suburban Chicago. I'm continuing my walk that I started with the 400 back episode from last time. And so it is still hot. In fact, it's a little hotter. It's half an hour later. It's warmer and sweatier. And I'm looking forward. I'm heading home now, so I'm looking forward to being there where the air conditioner is running and a cool glass of relaxation is waiting for me. That's not kidding. I actually have to do some grading today, so not quite. But it is sunny, and hopefully I won't get sunburned in the second half of my walk. So today, this episode, I am getting caught up. This brings me up to speed on new games that I've played. At this point, all we have left to talk about are a couple games I've tried online in Board Game Arena, which I usually try to sequester those and talk about them at the same time because the experience of a digital game is different. Instead, these are the last three of the on the table new games that I've tried recently. And that means it's time for one more episode. Shooting from the hip, triple shot. That's right, Shooting from the hip, triple shot is a light review episode in which I talk for a few minutes about games that I have encountered for the first time, or maybe first and second time recently. In this episode, I'm going to be talking about 3 games that I played for the first time and giving you a bit of a sense of what they are. So to start with, the first game I want to talk about is called Control. Now this is an interesting one. A friend of mine brought it over. I'm not sure where he got it. It's a light card game where you have a deck of cards, and in the game, on your turn, you are drawing a card and playing a card, and you're manipulating the board state in order to try to get one of the win conditions. And that way, it feels a little bit like Flux. It is not as random as Flux, but it certainly has some of the elements in terms of having to keep an eye on what the other players are doing and playing cards to interfere with what they're doing so that you can get ahead. So there's a little bit of table talk where you're talking to each other about what people are doing. There's a little bit of manipulating the board state, and then a little bit of trying to get ahead while they don't. Certainly luck is a factor because you're drawing cards, but generally that's the way the game goes. When you play 4-player, as we did, as I recall, you play in teams sitting across the table from one another. So there's an interesting element where you're trying to work with the other player to get one of you into the win state. And it doesn't matter which one. If one of you wins, you both win. So that team element is different than Flux and pretty entertaining. I would also say the design aesthetic for this game is much more luxurious than Flux. In Flux, you have a very simple design aesthetic, Looney Labs sort of producing, well, let's say it as it is, cheap components with simple art. Makes it easy to play Flux, but it's a very simple game, simply produced. Control, the card backs are very nice. The cards themselves are really nice, sort of think bicycle quality, really nice cards, but with different fronts. And the quality of the experience reflects the quality of the components. That said, Control is a very simple game. As you can tell from the review, I don't even remember it that well. Having just played it a couple weeks ago, it's already sort of fading into the background for me. I bet in a year, if you say, what's that game Control to me, I won't remember it at all. I'll have to look it up. I'll look at pictures of it and I'll be like, oh yeah, it was that card game. So this would definitely go to use the blue pink peg rating system in which they say, you must play it, really want to try it. The third option is would play it if somebody brought it out to play. That's where I would put Control. If somebody gets it out, says, hey, you want to try this? Give it a try. Maybe it'll be right up your alley and you will become a Control freak. Trademark. Maybe it will be a really prominent game for you. For me, it was pretty forgettable, but I had a good time while I was playing it. So take that for what you will. That's Control. Next up, we have another light card game that I got to try at Toggle Gaming. This is Archer, Once You Go Blackmail, ... This is a themed game, themed around the cartoon on FX Archer, which is a spy spoof full of all sorts of sort of James Bond type situations. Very silly, very absurdist. H. John Benjamin is one of the voices. Judy Greer is another voice. They're amazing. The mom from Arrested Development, Jessica something, is the mom. It's a great TV show. So this is a card game themed around the TV show that is an iteration on Love Letter. Love Letter, of course, is the game that started the microgame craze. It has the basic idea of you are trying to be the last character standing, finding out which cards the other players have. Generally, the idea is that you have a card in your hand, you get another card, then you play one of the two cards that you have. Each card has a power on it as well as a rank. Your goal is to eliminate all the other players, often by figuring out what role they have, and either sort of besting them by comparing two of your cards, or some cards will let you, if you can guess what card the other person has, then you win. Or if you make it to the end of the game, to have the highest ranked card left at the end of the game. The system is pretty simple, and the original Love Letter is an excellent game, well worth your time. I would say the Archer Love Letter it was pretty enjoyable. They change a couple of the powers a little bit, so that if you're used to playing regular Love Letter, you do have to consult read the cards, because they do something a little different than regular Love Letter does. But generally, the gameplay feel is very similar. The win conditions are very similar. The story doesn't, they've given up on having the story make any sense. The original Love Letter, there was a reason you're trying to do what you're trying to do, ostensibly. And in this game, there doesn't seem to be one at all. Although I will admit, I did not read the rule book. I was just taught how to play the game. And I was taught in about 10 seconds because we played Love Letter. So read the card to figure out what it does. Let's go. If you like Love Letter, but you don't like the theme of sneaking love letters to the princess, maybe the Archer one is the one for you. I thought it was fun. It's fun to have the Archer theme, but ultimately it's another Love Letter game. So take that for what you will. Oh, what's out of here? Bonus? What? There's a bonus reflection right here. So I have one more game to talk about, but before I do, I want to take a moment to share my experience playing for the first time a game that I've only played online otherwise, and that is Foundations of Rome. I recently went to a game day with a friend, and we had played a game of King of Tokyo, then we played a game of Dominion, which the game of Dominion was really fun. I had not played Dominion with expansions before, so this person, they just did a random draw of cards from all the Dominion expansions. We got this very different cards, which was really interesting, and I enjoyed that immensely. And then somebody said, well, in my car I've got Foundations of Rome, and I was like, yes, please. So they brought in Foundations of Rome. They had the super fancy Sundrop painted superly duperly kit. We each got our own tray of minis. They look gorgeous. This game they might as well call it Table Presence the game. It is beautiful to look at, fun to play. In the game, you're either going to acquire deeds, or you're going to get income, or you're going to play a building. Those are your three options. The way the deeds work, much like the game Acquire, the board is divided up into a bunch of spaces that have numbers and letters on them, and the deed cards come out, and you get a card with a specific column and number on it, and then you put your little ownership token on that space. Then as the game goes along, you try to get some that are next to each other so that you can put your bigger buildings down. And then when it's your turn to put a building down, you're going to put down a building. Each building gets you either income or points, and they do this in different ways. Some of the games will get you income and points. Oh, and population is the third thing they could get you. Some of them get you that just by rote. Maybe there'll be a thing that gets you 4 population, a building that gets you 4 population. You put that building down, your population rating goes up by 4. There's some games, some that will get you income. They will say 1 or 2 or 3 coins. And then whenever you take an income turn, you get your base 5 income plus however many of these coins you've revealed from your board. And then the third way is there are some that get you points. Some buildings just get points themselves. The coin buildings often do too. But they also get points for being next to buildings of other types. So there are buildings that get points for being next to buildings that have people. There are buildings that get points for being next to buildings that make other points, etc., etc. So what you're doing is you're accumulating these spaces and putting buildings onto the board, and you're allowed to keep upgrading the buildings, replacing one building with another, as long as the new building you're putting in is bigger than any of the old buildings that you've taken out. So you could have 2 buildings that are 2 spaces big, and you could replace them with one building that's 4 spaces big if you wanted. But you could not replace one 4-space building with another 4-space building. As rule sets go, it's pretty simple. Think about Century as a similar level of complexity. There's a lot more interactivity because you're fighting for space on this board, and you can really get people or screw people by how you take things. But ultimately, it is a relatively simple game in which you're sort of building this city out on the board with like I said, fantastic table presence. I think my original assessment of Foundations of Rome stands, which is that it's a fine game. I enjoyed it. I would play it if somebody said, hey, I've got this, do you want to play it? But I'm glad I didn't back it. If they came out with a $30 version of it, like that was just cardboard tiles, or a $40 version of it, I might consider getting it. But even then, I don't know that I would, because, if it's at the level of a Carpe Diem or a Baron Park, I like both of those games way more than I like this. Even the Century games, I like all the Century games better than I like Foundations of Rome. So while I enjoy Foundations of Rome, I don't think it would be, in the long term, a game that I would add to my collection. But it is really good, and I would recommend you at least play it if you get a chance. I would not recommend buying it without playing it, though, because unbelievably expensive. I know that they're going to do a new Kickstarter soon for a second print run, because they don't sell it retail, because it's just too much stuff in the box and it doesn't fit. So I guess if it interests you enough, you could play it on Tabletop Simulator and then jump in on the next Kickstarter, but make sure you do play it first. All right, bonus evaluation done. Pew, 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 pew. All right, so the final game that I want to talk about today is a game that a friend brought to Toggle Gaming. We played it. It took about an hour and 45 minutes or so. I guess it could have gone much longer, but we played badly. Honestly, I played badly. And this is Mare Nostrum Empire. Mare Nostrum Empire is, I think, a reboot of the original Mare Nostrum game, but it's a similar idea. Each player represents one of, I think, 6 different factions, countries, civilizations that were emerging around the Mediterranean in ancient Egypt, ancient Greece times. You play one of these factions, and your job is to win through one of several different win conditions. The first win condition is to build the pyramids just by having a ton of money and resources. The second way is to occupy a certain number of the wondrous cities, or the legendary cities. The third way is to occupy the home territory of a certain number of your opponents. And there might be a fourth way as well. To be at the leader of these 3 different sort of commerce tracks. As the game goes along, you ebb and flow in your ownership of these spaces and in the rise and fall along the tracks. Like Game of Thrones, each person who's leading on one of the tracks gets a special power that they get to use during the game. This is the place where I said I might have lost it for everybody. My power that I had at the beginning of the game was to determine how much trading we get to do in the game. And the trading is a really crucial part of the game. Each round, people are going to put out things to trade with. And the way trading works is if it's your turn to trade, you get to take a thing that someone else put out. There's no negotiation, there's no paying. You just take a thing. And then they get to take a thing from someone else. It could be from you, could be from someone else. And everybody goes around taking a thing from the stuff they put out to trade until everyone has gotten an even number of things. Sometimes the person who goes first will end up having one extra, or it might be somebody else, but I think it's always the person who goes first if that happens. And if so, then you have to put out one of the things that you traded, so there are several things available, and then they get to pick from all the things that are there. Or maybe you get to give them one extra, I don't remember. And then there is a warfare phase and a building phase. As far as civilization games go, I thought it was fine. A really nice production, interesting mechanisms that allow you to interact with each other in various ways. I can't say I was all that excited by it. I'm not sure. Maybe it's the kind of generic civilizations around the Mediterranean theme. I just didn't get behind a lot. Maybe it was that conflict seemed to be at a core of the game, like you really couldn't do it well without conflict. And most of the players were conflict averse, including myself, which meant that the core of the game is to stop one another from doing things by fighting. And we weren't fighting, which meant that if the person who won hadn't won, somebody else would have won that turn also, because no one was fighting. So I'm not sure what to say about the game, except that it probably isn't to my taste. I can't really evaluate the quality of the game because we only played, I think the game we played of it was about a third of the length of a normal game because somebody won really quickly. In a longer game, I think the dynamics of the different parts of the game would come out in more interesting ways, but because we ended relatively quickly with somebody making a decisive move, that's how the game ended. I enjoyed the time playing with it, and I enjoyed playing with my friends. I would probably play it again if this person brought it and said, hey, I really want to play this again. What do you say? I would probably play it again, but I can't see myself seeking it out to play. I was glad to have tried it the once, but not probably my favorite, or not for me. So that's Mare Nostrum Empires. I'd probably put it on the would play it if somebody got it out level, but would not necessarily seek it out. So there you go. So those are 3 games plus the little bonus reflection for you today. I'd love to hear what you think about those games. Have you played them? Head over to Board Game Geek Guild 3269 and share your thoughts on those. I'd also be keen to hear what else you've been playing lately. Share your new experiences, your shooting from the hip reviews over on the Guild. Well, that's about it for me today. Thanks for joining me on my walk today. I hope that your next walk is as pleasant as mine was. Bye-bye.
Brought to you by Rattlebox Games.